And we're recording. Alrighty. Good afternoon, everyone. This is Attorney Robyn McCoy with Political Coffee with Robyn and Tracey. And we have, of course, Attorney Tracey Martin, and we have Washtenaw County Sheriff Jerry Clayton. This is a special edition today. So welcome, Tracey. Welcome, Sheriff Clayton. Tracey, I'll turn it over to you to give some remarks, and then Sheriff Clayton, I'll introduce you.
Okay.
Great, fantastic. Thanks for the introduction, Robyn. And yes, good afternoon to everybody. Thank you for watching. This is a special edition on a special topic that's impacting all of America. Today, we're going to talk about policing in America, citizen safety, technology and policing. And we're very proud to have join us today, Sheriff Jerry Clayton, the Washtenaw County Sheriff. And we thank you for watching. And please remember to like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends, family, and neighbors, because there's going to be a lot of important information coming out in today's broadcast. Back to you, Robyn.
Yes. Okay. So Sheriff Clayton, I've known you, gosh, for a long time. I was there when you first, my sister and I were there, obviously supporting you. We've been very supportive of you in terms of what you've been doing in, in Washtenaw County. And so, I know that I had reached out to you. It was back in November of 2014 to start talking about doing programming on what to do when stopped by the police. I was really saddened by a lot of the things that I was seeing. And, I definitely appreciate the partnership that you've had with me as far as going into the schools and coming in doing these programs like I know we did a program with Rita White where we talked about kind of tips on what to do when stopped by the police. So I definitely appreciate that. And I know that you are, you're a national trainer on these issues, and that you've just been very, I would say, very good about being transparent on these issues. And so I'm going to just let the audience know briefly about your career before we turn it over to you and start with the question. So Jerry Clayton is a 30-year public safety service professional, currently serving his third term as the sheriff of Washtenaw County. He leads an organization of 420 staff serving a population of over 358,000, covering a 720 square mile geographical area. During his career with the office, he served as a frontline correction officer, deputy sheriff, and command officer. He's also was appointed to the following executive positions: corrections commander, police services commander, and SWAT team commander, training instruction. So he's a certified criminal justice trainer and instructor for more than 25 years. He's provided training and consulting services to a variety of private and public sector clients, including the United States Department of Justice and the National Sheriff's Association and the American Civil Liberties Union. He serves on boards of numerous local organizations, including the Washtenaw Area Council for Children, the local chapter of the National Alliance on Mental Illness, the Washtenaw County Mental Health Treatment Court Advisory Board, the Washtenaw County Continuum of Care Board, Ending Homelessness, and the Safe House Center. He's received international recognition for his expertise and work in the criminal justice profession. In 2016, he was invited as a representative of U.S. law enforcement to Barcelona, Spain. In 2017, at the invitation of the United Nations High Commission on Human Rights, Sheriff Clayton was the representative from the United States and a presenter at an international conference on law enforcement and bias-based policing in Geneva, Switzerland. In February of 2018, Sheriff Clayton was asked to participate in a US-UK exchange in London, England, focusing on building leadership for fair and effective policing. He attended Eastern Michigan University. I actually have had him come and talk to some of my students because I teach a class there on law and African-American experience, majoring in public safety administration. He also graduated from the EMU School of Staff and Command and numerous other leadership programs. He's married to his wife of 30 years, Sybil, and has 3 sons. Jerry, if there's anything you want to update from that, let us know. But again, welcome. We're glad to have you with us on this. It's actually a beautiful Sunday.
It is a beautiful Sunday. And there is one thing that I want to add, Robyn, to Sheriff Clayton's, or Sheriff Jerry. He's given me permission to call him Sheriff Jerry. He said Jerry, actually, but I said I got to give him his respect. I mean, when you have a resume like that. But what I found really intriguing about Sheriff Jerry's background is that he was invited and appointed to become a founding member of the National Criminal Justice think tank out of Washington, D.C. And it has in its membership a number of really amazing people, like former Governor of California, Jerry Brown, also CNN analyst Van Jones, who I believe used to be President Obama's Green Czar, and former Philadelphia Mayor Michael Nutter, among others. And, you know, you don't get to belong to a think tank like the National Criminal Justice, the National Criminal Justice think tank, CJJ, as they call it, without being an expert, an innovator, and an influencer when it comes to criminal justice and policing in America. So we're really pleased to have Sheriff Jerry join us today.
Well, thank you both, Robyn and Tracey, for the introduction and really including me in this discussion today. Yeah, the only thing I would add or change is, so now I'm in my 4th term. So I feel really, really fortunate in Washtenaw County that the people have seen fit to return me for what I tell them folks, this is my last term. So
really?
Yeah. I originally said I'd run 3 terms, and we've accomplished that. But there are a couple other things. There's always going to be something you have left to put in the outbox.
Right.
There are a couple of really special things that we're working on that I really want to see to fruition, and then we'll call it a career and just pivot to another chapter in my life. So I feel really blessed and fortunate to do the work. And yes, Robyn and her family and her dad were really strong supporters when I first run, when nobody knew who I was, right? No name recognition, no money in the bank to run. And they've been supportive for all of now 13 years. So I'm really appreciative.
Well, Sheriff Jerry, you know, I'm really into politics and I've worked on a number of campaigns. And what compelled you to run for office? I always ask this of guests who are elected officials. Did you have some kind of calling, some sort of epiphany? What made you decide to run for office and serve?
That's a great question. I'll try to be brief. So, you know, I'd served with the sheriff's office for 20 years prior, right? And I served under Sheriff Scheibel, who, you know, we'll talk about politics, right? So remember, Washtenaw County was once a Republican county.
Right.
And Ron Scheibel was a Republican sheriff, but he really was a moderate, right? And he talked a lot about, especially in a sheriff's role, politics, you don't get into R&D, you get into what's right. Okay. So I served with him. He lost when I had about 4 years to go. So I finished my 4 years and I really thought I was done. And I'd been doing some other work anyway, some private consulting, and I'd been doing work with John Lamberth. And John Lamberth is considered the godfather of statistical analysis for traffic stops. So we were doing bias-based policing studies all over the country. We did some ethnic profiling studies in Europe, and I really thought that's what I was going to do. And then, you know, under the tenure of my predecessor, things just weren't working out right. And I actually got recruited to run by Brian Mackey and the other countywide elected officials and some really influential people in Democratic politics in Washtenaw County. And again, I started with really no name recognition, not a lot of money in the bank, and I did have a vision. I did know what was possible if the sheriff's office understood their influence, and we didn't see ourselves as a law enforcement agency, that we really saw ourselves as a community building organization, right? And leverage that influence to change a community in more than just enforcing the law. And that's what I talked about. And that's really been a guiding vision of mine since I've been in office. So again, I feel really, really fortunate. Who would have thought I got elected, and then to get elected a few more times. And I'll end with this piece. So I'm the only sheriff in, you know, Washtenaw County Sheriff's Office will reach their 200th year in 2023. So in 200 years, I'm the only person to get elected to the position 4 times. So I feel
wow.
really, fortunate. And I'll just say this, that's not about me, that's about the team. And then that's about Washtenaw County rallying together to try to see a better vision for what's possible.
Right, and I know, being there on election night, it was really exciting. At the same time, we got our first Black president. We got our first, Washtenaw County got its first Black sheriff. So I think that, you know, and having somebody that is engrossed in the community, that makes a world of difference when it comes to policing. So I definitely applaud you for that, Jerry, or Sheriff Clayton. I applaud you for that. But we do want to make sure, we always do political coffee. And I usually have tea. We let folks know what we're drinking. So I have a Michigan mug. Yesterday I had a yellow one. Today I've got a blue, and I'm drinking Robo's tea with lemon and honey. And Sheriff Clayton, what are you drinking?
So I have my sheriff's mug, and I have Cavalia coffee. So although it's 1 o'clock, I'm still caffeine up just to keep that momentum going.
Okay, and
That's
Tracey,
great.
what about you?
That's a cool mug. I like both of your mugs. U of M mug yesterday on the show for our doubleheader, and today you've got the blue. So
Right.
what does that mean? Home or away?
It's
Home.
Go Blue.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I've got, you know,
Well, yellow is actually my favorite color, but you know, blue and yellow, Go Blue.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. And I just love Sheriff Jerry's mug. That's a real strong looking mug for a strong looking sheriff. And he's not beyond strong looking. He is strong. And so today I brought back my YouTube mug, you know, that has like, comment, share, and subscribe, because I'm asking everybody to do those things, like, comment, share, and subscribe. Our new YouTube channel, Political Coffee, because, you know, this is going to be a great conversation today about policing in America and Attorney McCoy's, Robyn's wonderful What to Do When Stopped by the Police programming, and issue that's close to my heart, technology in policing. You know, one of my issues is facial recognition technology, but there's so much going on with technology and policing. So I toss it back to you, Robyn, with the first question for Sheriff Jerry. Oh, and Robyn, I might add, I had invited the viewers to put up questions on the Political Coffee Facebook page, and I'm having some technical difficulties with my brand new laptop, and I can't see the screen. So I don't know if anybody's posting up questions for Sheriff Jerry, because I've got to say, when we promoted the show today, there was a lot of interest about Sheriff Jerry being on this show. So I anticipate that there might be some questions out there on
for my end, I will see if I'm able to pull it up, and then see if there's any questions on there. But yeah, so Sheriff Clayton, I'll start. I mean, there's so many things to talk about. There's the Derek Chauvin trial. There's general policing in America. There was a recent incident. I don't know if you saw it, with a African-American male that's in the Army and the military, and there was an incident at a gas station. And then I understand that you were instrumental in helping with the situation in Ypsilanti. They said somebody connected to the Boogaloo Boys. So why don't we start with that? And, you know, I know everything is still under investigation, so you just comment on what you're able to talk about, or maybe what's already in the news. Like, can you start with that?
So you may be talking about the barricaded gunman we had a couple of weeks ago. Yeah. So again, I'll try to keep it brief. We had a situation where a young man allegedly feloniously assaulted his parents. They escaped out of the house. Our staff responded. They tried to engage this young man, but he wouldn't engage. He retreated back in his house. It's a huge house, huge compound with a big clearing. So he barricaded himself, and he had AR-15 and body armor, and the rumored he had night goggles, all that stuff. So anyway, we ended up in a barricaded gunman situation. So SWAT responded, our crisis negotiation responded, and you know, in Washtenaw County, our crisis negotiation also has clinicians, mental health professionals on the team. Which is really important, because they give us a lot of feedback, and they give us a profile, and you know, it's important. Our crisis negotiations are great, but having that extra element of, you know, what may escalate, what may de-escalate, what that person may be going through. So it was a 36-hour standoff, quite frankly. And I'll be honest with you, in our subject control use of force policy, right up front in the preface, we say that we value not just the sanctity of our own staff's life, but the sanctity of all human life, right?
Okay.
And people shouldn't die because we respond to a call. So it's really important to us, and one of our guiding principles is that, look, we want everybody to survive this, not just physically safe, but emotionally and psychologically. So we negotiated with him, and the Boogaloo Boys and the militia come in this. He disconnected contact with us, right? But he was active on social media.
Okay.
He was in like a Zoom meeting, he's Facebook Live, and this really ginned up a lot of the militia folks, Second Amendment folks. And they're talking to him, and, you know, there's reports that there, you know, folks were going to come up from as far as Alabama to help support him for his Second Amendment. And, you know, we're in a residential neighborhood, so you got neighbors are concerned that all this is going on.
Okay.
You've got Boogaloo Boys and so all of that was part of it. So we not only had to engage that young man, we had to keep the community safe and make sure that we didn't have people from the outside infiltrating into our perimeter, causing more confusion and maybe even a bigger threat. The other thing is, you know, right after George Floyd last year, you know, we had our own incident in Apple Ridge, and there were protests that happened as a result of that, even on our campus. And we had information from the feds that the Boogaloo Boys were coming down and mixing into that crowd.
Okay.
So, you know, those folks oftentimes act as agitators. So we connected with the people that were protesting. Look, I believe people are always allowed, you know, we should respect people's right to free speech, even when that free speech is criticizing us. That's okay. I mean, that's the role of the people, to tell government we don't like what they're doing. But we had to balance that, and we had to keep security for the people that were protesting and making sure that the militia groups weren't trying to start a violent encounter that would, first off, compromise what the protesters are protesting about, but also put everybody in jeopardy. So that's the balance that we're facing. And I think more and more when we have this situation, especially with social media, Boogaloo Boys, militia, folks like that are using social media to really disrupt our communities, to really disrupt what's going on. And I think in some degree, they're co-opting the message for a lot of the for the protesters. You know, Black Lives Matters, other groups that have a strong message. You have the groups like that are trying to infiltrate and trying to leverage that message to create even more disruption that actually supports their ideology, not the ideology of groups like Black Lives Matter and other folks that are really talking about equity and equal treatment in the justice.
So that makes your job a lot tougher. But I want to back up a little bit, because you preside over a 424 member staff of sheriffs, and there's a difference between sheriff's operation and a city police operation, different responsibilities. Sheriff Jerry, could you explain to the viewing audience what the difference is and what your responsibilities are in Washtenaw County?
Sure. And if I'm moving too far, just give me the timeout, and I can always
You're fine.
stop.
No, you're fine.
So the first distinction, I think the really important distinction, and you know, we're an office, so we talk about the sheriff's office, not a department.
Okay.
And here's the reason why we make that distinction. So the sheriff is a constitutional office, right? That position is in our state constitution, and it's elected by the people. So I work directly for you. If you live in Washtenaw County, you're one of my bosses. So in the political architecture, you know, a chief works for a mayor or city council or a city manager, and he or she really has to, I'll say toe the line, but really be aligned with the politics and the voices that are going on there. I'm independently elected, although the Board of Commissioners have influence over the budget. That's it.
Okay.
So I can operate a lot more independent. I can exercise my voice a lot stronger and not have to get permission from others. So that's the first distinction. So I'll give you the 4 primary things we're responsible for. So the state constitution doesn't say a sheriff's office is responsible for police services, right? Having patrol. But in Washtenaw County, we contract for it.
Oh.
So in the jurisdictions that contract with us, we provide direct patrol services. So I'll just give you a couple. So Ypsilanti Township, Superior Township, the village of Manchester, places like that, Scioto Township. We're also responsible for running the jail. So I tell people all the time, it's not my jail, it's the people's jail. So we should run the jail aligned with the values of the community. So in our facility, I hate talking about inmates, I talk about people that are incarcerated, right? Incarcerated individuals. And 90% of the people that come in our jail are going right back to the community. So a lot of what we do is really trying to help them address root causes so they can go back into the community and really be productive members of the community. The third thing, primary responsibility, is emergency management. So that is when there's a tornado or some kind of hazmat situation, we're responsible for responding to that. We're also responsible for Metro Dispatch. So we dispatch for about 93% of the emergency calls that happen in Washtenaw County. And the last, we're also responsible for the waterways in the county. So recovering drowned bodies, making sure that people, when they're boating, adhere to the law on the waterways. And
so you have a Marine division then?
Yes. Yep.
Oh, that's pretty. Yeah, that's very comprehensive.
Yeah, and the last thing I'll say is when I was elected, I was asked to take responsibility for community corrections. So that's like the alternatives to incarceration, all of that. So we have that aligns with our corrections division. So it's really, when you think about the
courts, right? Sheriff,
yeah, we provide court security. Yes.
Okay,
yes.
You do. Okay, that's what I thought. Okay.
So when you look at the whole spectrum of criminal justice, and that's the other difference between a sheriff's office and a police department. When you look at the spectrum of the correction, the criminal justice, if you have a full service sheriff's office, we hit almost every point on that continuum. So again, we have a lot of influence on what happens in our system.
Right. And I know you referenced the Apple Ridge situation. I remember I had reached out to you because I had people calling me in the community. Are you going to come down? Are you going to protest? And I'm talking to some other high profile attorneys.
What's the Apple Ridge situation?
Well, Jerry, why don't you go ahead?
So again, to try to keep this brief. So the night, I think it was the night after George Floyd, we had a situation where, and I can't talk too much to it because the case is still open. We responded to a situation. Our staff was it was a shooting. We responded to the shooting. Witnesses identified a man who they said was the shooter going into a house. We went to the house. They wouldn't let us in. People that were connected to the house was inside our perimeter. Our staff interacted with them. And then there was, we tried to establish control. And on the video, it shows our officer hitting a woman. So that in and of itself, when you look at that image, it's a disturbing image.
Yeah, bad aesthetics.
We found out later what was going on, and I'll leave it at that because again, that's still a case that has to be tried. And so it exploded. So you had that incident right after George Floyd. So all of that momentum and that energy was all caught together, and we ended up having to navigate that pretty much all summer.
Right. I remember I got calls about that. People wanted me to come down and protest and be involved. And, I was trying to.
Was Gradiel situation?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Tracy, I think you and I talked about that. We talked about that during the summer. And so, and again, it's like you have these situations, people want you to come down and be involved with the protest, but it's like, we're lawyers. You have to assess the situation, find out everything that's going on. People, you got people's heightened sentence because of a George Floyd situation, other things, you had like Ahmaud Arbery, George Floyd, you have Breonna Taylor. So people they see what's happening on TV. with, and there are, we're seeing Black folks being brutalized, and then something happens locally, you're getting, you're getting certain snippets of it. You may not be getting the whole story. So folks are calling me, are you going to come down? How are you going to be involved? And, I evaluated it. I talked with you. I talked to some other community leaders. And I also I made videos. I have on my Robyn Legal video, like how to protest peacefully for people who wanted to protest for that situation and for the George Floyd situation. But then I also had, because, shout out to my mom, Nurse Pam, who was like, she's like, for me, the ultimate police. She was just like, okay, we're in the middle of a pandemic. How you gonna go out there? No. She's like, oh no, you don't need to go out there. So I also made, for those of us that are trying to be careful, like how to protest peacefully, stay your ass at home, which I got a lot of hits. Y'all gonna probably see that some more coming out. I mean, people can protest. If you want to protest, these are the rules. But if you want, you can also protest at home. You can do videos, you can do songs. There's other ways to protest. Like I have, I've shown it. I have a young man that made a poster for Breonna Taylor. And like you have said, Sheriff Clayton, there are times you get in a protest and you don't know who's for you or against you. We saw on the news, like they had a white person that put themselves in a black face in one of the cities where they were protesting. I don't know if that might have been Minnesota, and went and broke into the stores, and he's in blackface, but he's a white person. So it's like, you're protesting, you don't know who's for you or against you. And I'm not saying people shouldn't protest. I've been to protest. I definitely was protesting and supporting, advocating for affirmative action at the U of M Law School, which we still need to work on that. And I went to the Million Woman March. I've been to protests, but like you said, you've got to be careful who's out there, and just doing due diligence on situations, and also thinking about what's the most effective way of getting results. Like we see in Atlanta, they have boycotted some of those issues with voting, and that sometimes boycotting may be the way to go with these situations. So Tracey, I'm going to turn it back to you.
Yes, well, I want to go back to the sheriff's office that Sheriff Jerry presides over. So one of the issues in community policing, effective community policing, is that the sheriff's office or police department reflects the community. And I'm curious to know, Sheriff Jerry, what are the demographics of your office in terms of the deputies, corporals that you supervise?
Yeah, a good question. So, and we have that on our website. If you look at the entire sheriff's office, I think we're somewhere between 16 and 18% African American, and it pushes up to maybe 19% total people of color. Okay. But we're not nearly where we need. So a lot. Remember, we have a lot of different places where we provide services. We don't have that 16, 18% that actually do patrol service. But okay. we've been really intentional in trying to build that. And I'll be honest with you, my belief is that wasn't a real big issue with my predecessor. So we started from really ground zero. So we've been trying to build that. We sponsor folks now. And what I mean by that is we pay for them to go to the academy. We pay them while they're in the academy. And listen, you both of you have a wide reach. So I would ask you to encourage folks that look like us to explore the possibility of a career with Washington County Sheriff's Office.
Right. I know Derek Jackson, he from your office sent me some information. So whenever he sends me stuff, I definitely share it with my contacts. And I know Tracey can do that as well. So we definitely want to make sure we have really good recruits and recruiting more people that look like us to come and work in the sheriff's office.
And I'm also curious, Sheriff Jerry, to know about the gender breakdown. How many females do you have in the office?
Overall, I think the percentage is close, about the same. But again, but not in police services, not on patrol. And really? I have to tell you, and it's because, I'll just be frank with you, African American or women of color is I won't quite say it's a unicorn, but it's close. In Detroit, because the population, you have more in the population. In Washington County, I mean, we have been striving. I feel really fortunate now because we have a line, we have a number of African-American females that are coming in the pipeline, right? That we have recruited, that are going through the academy. So we're slowly but surely starting to gain momentum. In corrections, we have, I think we're probably about 25% female with correction staff and starting to get more women of color. So, you know, the other thing that I'm striving for is not just getting people of color in the door, it's them being at all levels of the organization, right?
Right.
And not just on the front line, but in mid-level management and executive leadership.
So yes, what about command?
We're starting to get there. In the gender, I think we're really good. From a racial standpoint, we can be better. But you have to build at the base before you have people that then you can promote. So a lot of our traction has been in my appointments. So who I can appoint. And I'll just give this shout out. You know, we got approved to hire a director of diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Right.
So
I saw that. Yeah.
we just put that out. I just went through the applications. We had just under 100 people apply for that position.
Wow.
So we're in the process now of going through that hiring process. We're also hiring what we call a lead program coordinator. So diversion, deflection, you know, keeping people out of jail. We're putting that program in place, and we're hiring a coordinator for that, and a number of other positions that we're hiring. So we're slowly but surely getting that traction. But I'll be honest with you. I mean, you know, we're it's hard now to get folks that look like us to now want to be in this job, right?
Well, you read my mind, because, you know, my next question was, you know, you are a man of color and you're heading up this, you know, big sheriff's office, and you belong to this DC think tank, and you traveled and presented all over the world on issues of policing. And so with everything that's going on in the United States of America, you know, the George Floyd incident, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, the list goes on, police shootings and excessive force. You as a Black man, have you ever felt conflicted in the role that you play in policing? I'll just end my question there.
No, that's a great question. Conflicted, yes, and challenged, and everything that goes along with it, right? I tell folks, so I've been Black in this country, a Black male in this country for 56 years. I've been in the profession for 33.
Okay.
And more, so I'm first a Black male in this country. Okay. So what I see, what I process, my ideology, everything is influenced by that, and understanding our history as Black folks in this country, right? 400 years total, but also 200 years as it relates to the relationship between Black folks and the police.
Right.
So I'm conflicted only in the sense that, look, I think the profession has noble intent. There's nobility in a profession where people are willing to give their lives for somebody they don't even know. So I think we have to honor that. And I believe that the majority of people that come into the profession, they're good people trying to do the right thing. But police are no different than any other profession, right? Attorneys, doctors, bakers, plumbers. You have biased people, bad people in every profession. So as hard as we try to keep those people out, we know they're in. And the other part for me is, look, if I'm in the position and I've been blessed enough to lead in the position, then I better be courageous enough to call out what I think is wrong. So what eases me being conflicted is the fact that I've given an opportunity to give a platform, and let's talk about what's right. Let's talk about the right way to do it. Let's acknowledge the flaws in policing. Let's acknowledge the fact that there's systemic racism throughout the country, and there's been systemic racism in the profession of policing. And we can't argue that driving while Black is real and walking while Black is real. Right. And going through the criminal justice system as an African American receiving disparate treatment is real. There's no argument around that. People can try to argue, but the facts are what they are. So now we have to figure out, what do we do to change that? How do we challenge the system in a way that changes the experience for people that look like us? And Robyn talked about it when she did my intro. My wife and I have been married for 33 years. We have 3 sons. A lot of what I try to do now is is for my sons and everybody else's sons and daughters. That is a motivator for me. So yeah, sometimes I think it's tough, but look, what's tougher than that is being Black in this country when our police are not doing the things that they're supposed to do. That's tougher and more dangerous than me being conflicted about being Black and being in the profession, if that makes sense.
Yes, it makes total sense. And I'd like you to talk more about, talk about this hashtag 8 can't wait. I that came up in my research. And is that one of the principles that your office adopts to preserve the police community relationship and to preserve life?
Yeah, it's sort of funny when, especially right out last year in the midst of all this, I was getting these emails about 8 can't wait and the principles. And my response was, well, we would have to go backwards to get to that point because we've exceeded that. And our use of force, subject control policy, a lot of our policies are online. All of our critical policies are online for people to look at. But all the principles of 8 can't wait, all the things that they asked for, we had already had in place for at least 2 to 3 years.
So we're well ahead of the curve.
Yeah, we're trying to be. We try to anticipate what's next. We're trying to anticipate how we get better. So when 8 can't wait rolled their stuff out, we were like, okay, we're good. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about what we're doing. Look at our policy. Do you think we need to think about something differently? So we're very much open to that. And we believe that the people have a right to question what we do and how we do it.
Right.
And your office has eliminated all manner of chokeholds. That's part of the principles.
So what we did with neck restraints is, and so here's the thing. This is almost like no knocks, and I want to have this conversation.
Okay.
Sure.
So I'll say this: if I have a deputy sheriff in a life and death situation with an assailant, and the only way that they're going to survive that is to choke that person out, I'm not going to tell them not to do that.
Right.
However, if you're in a situation and that situation does not warrant that, it's not a lethal force situation, a life or death situation, then you are 100% prohibited from any kind of neck restraint.
Okay.
100%. And it's the same with no knocks. So everybody's taking away no knocks. They're on very rare occasions.
And you're talking about no knock warrants.
No knock warrants, I'm sorry. Yes. There are very rare occasions where I believe, not just for the safety of the police, but for the safety of the person that they're looking for and the safety of the community, that a no knock warrant is appropriate.
But Sheriff, how can you say that in the context of the Breonna Taylor situation? I mean, I put myself in Breonna Taylor's position. Listen, I own firearms. I've been through the police academy in Detroit. I was a Detroit Police Reserve officer. Where I am now, it's like a mini armory. If somebody comes to my house and I don't know who they are, the police don't knock and announce, I might have been a Breonna Taylor myself if that happened to me. So it just seems so ultra dangerous, not only for the citizens, but also for police.
Yeah, so I think the law is pretty clear. So let me just talk about the Breonna Taylor situation and some of the other ones that have happened that have ended in tragedy.
Right, yeah.
It was not, so if the police had followed the law, the way the case law has laid out for no-knock warrants, and if the judges had held the police to the standard that's established in case law around no-knock warrants, Breonna Taylor and those other incidents would not have happened. So remember, in the Breonna Taylor situation, the police put affidavits for no warrants in 3 locations. All of them were the same. They articulated the same thing. It was like a template. It was a shortcut. And the case law is very clear that the police have to specifically speak to the circumstances that warrant them to violate people's Fourth Amendment rights against unreasonable searches and seizures by saying, look, if we don't do this, this person has a known history of violence. We know they have weapons in the house. I mean, they could get rid of evidence if we do a no knock. Now that part I think we can do without, because I'll say this. Look, if I'm going into your house for evidence of say drugs, if you can flush the drugs in the amount of time it would take for me to knock and go in, it's probably not a lot of drugs to begin with, right? You're not flushing kilos down a toilet in the time it takes me to announce and go in. So in that part of it, I do have an issue with. But if we can clearly articulate that the person we're looking for that we know is in that location has a history of violence, has access to weapons, and that if we tell them we're coming, the likelihood of them using that against us is higher, then I think in that narrow path, that's when no knocks are appropriate. In the Breonna Taylor, I will argue those circumstances, and I'll say it like this, from what I know and all the information I got, I did not see where they met the highest standards for a no knock to be issued. So
right, and I know for Breonna Taylor, it's crazy because it's like it seemed like they have the wrong information. She had with a former boyfriend of hers. They come in the house. Her boyfriend shoots at them, self-defense. Like Tracey said, you come to her house, you just show up. She got something for you, and then the boyfriend.
I posted notices as well, Robyn. There's notices on my property that I'm a legal
like, I got something for you. Yeah, and so it's like I got something, and then he shoots at the police. He gets charged. They tried to get him to turn on her. They're like, oh, she's dead. They tried to get him to turn, and then. There's public pressure they drop the charges against him, and here she is. She's a first responder in her home, minding her own business, and they had a sister in Chicago. She was in her home. They busted up in there. She's naked, and I mean, it's
Breonna Taylor was half naked too. I understood.
Yeah, it's just very hard, and Jerry, you and I have talked about this. What to do when the police come to the door, if it's an emergency.
This is a great segue.
Why don't we go over some of the tips? But it's like for some situations, just like the kids tell me, they're like, Mr. McCoy, Sheriff Clayton, it's good that you're here, but you're talking to us, but are you also talking to the police? Because we're sick of getting brutalized. So Sheriff Clayton, what are your tips generally? Let's just start with if the police come to your door, like what do you suggest people do?
And then let's go to traffic.
Right.
Yeah. So, you have an expectation. I'll go back to the Fourth Amendment, right? The law is very, very clear that you have an expectation of protection against unreasonable searches and seizures by government in your house, that your house is your domain. And that if the police come to your house, unless they have a warrant and they show you that warrant, and that warrant states that they can enter your house to come in and search, you don't have to let them in your house. And we know that, the police can be intimidating and folks feel intimidated by that, but you have your rights and you should exercise your rights. And we should be held to the highest, the absolute highest standard when we want to enter someone else's house, without a shadow of a doubt. And you have every right to protect yourself in your house. So please come to your house. You ask them who they are, where they're from, identification, why they're coming to your house, what they're looking for, do they have a warrant? And if they don't have a warrant, then don't let them in your house. And who are they looking for, and all of those things. So, the point is, you have every right to question when someone else wants to come into your house, and you're not. It shouldn't be alleged that you're hiding anything or you're being uncooperative, because you know what, other folks that don't look like us have no problem challenging the police in terms of making sure that the police are following the law and that they're not infringing on their constitutional rights. And people of color should exercise those same rights.
Right. Sheriff Jerry, I just wanted to relate to you an incident that happened at my home about a decade ago. And I know that you have a SWAT background, and I kind of got swatted. My husband and I underwent a separation, and then we reunified. And so it was strange because when I returned home, the police came knocking at my door. And I think I had just gotten out of the shower, and but my husband, by the way, is a firefighter, and but both of us knew the drill. We completely cooperated. It was a potentially volatile situation because the police were very guarded. I mean, one female officer had her hand on her firearm, at her waist. I don't know what information was told to the police or 911, but we completely cooperated, obeyed, stood still. This was at our house, mind you. And, everything went away, and my philosophy is that you just completely cooperate with the police, because you could be right all day long in terms of your position, but you could be dead if you do not cooperate, if you obstruct, to try to flee, elude, the whole R&O thing. What's your take?
So I'm right there with you. So the other thing is, and I'm glad you brought that up, because I have to add this last piece.
Okay.
And as attorneys, this, there could be exigent circumstances.
Right.
So that changes the whole dynamic. So if I got exigent circumstances, I don't need a warrant. Right. So if I'm chasing someone, or there's this emergency situation, and I need to gain entry, but again, remember, that's a very narrow path for police. And exigent circumstances, although some can be interpreted, is very specific what it is and what guides our actions. So the challenge for that is, as a member of the community, you don't know what the police know.
Right.
So they could come to the door under exigent circumstances and then ask to gain entry, and then you say, no, where's your warrant? You can't come in without a warrant. So you don't know if they're coming because of that. They should tell you, right? They should be able to articulate to you, here's why we're doing what we're doing. Here's the emergency here. Here's who, you're in danger if you don't. And then that should change your posture, right? So if they come to your house and they say, look, we're chasing someone who just did an RA or a carjacking or some of that nature, and the last known direction is it through, in your house or in your backyard or something like that. At that point, then they have legally grounds to search that area, because they have specific information, time and place, location, all of those things at that point give them the legal right to enter your property. But again, you, on the other side, you don't know that unless they tell you.
And then, and I know, Jerry, I know you have.
I know you. It was a scary situation.
I bet.
Even though I'm, law enforcement trained, and because it just kind of, threw us for a loop, so to speak. And the police never entered our home. They stayed at the threshold, and they did say, well, we're responding. There was a, domestic violence complaint. Domestic violence has never occurred in any of my relationships. And so, somebody was swatting us, and, that happens a lot these days. And some of those swatting incidents, as you know, Sheriff, can turn deadly if people don't know how to handle them.
Right. And Jerry, I know that when I had reached out to you, you had these cards, and I'll share them with the audience on what to do when stopped by the police. And I have videos from the beginning, from when we first started doing videos. I have them on my Robyn Legal website. I don't know if you have any videos on your website, but we can point the audience to that, because that's part of what motivated me to do these programming and partner with you and other law enforcement agencies to talk about what to do when stopped by the police, because like we talk about, we want to make sure people get home safely. The police get home, the public gets home. It's like, I have a dance background, and it's like, I think of myself as like a choreographer. Like, people are going to have scenarios with the police when they're in their home, in the car, on the street, even in the school. So how can we choreograph this in such a way where we have the least amount of circumstances. And I mean, for the home, obviously for us as attorneys, we say, okay, we're dealing with it more so on the damage control side. A lot of people come to us after they've already let the police in without a search warrant. The police find something, drugs, guns, illegal stuff, and then we're damage control. And then you're like, okay, well, did you let them in? Did you give them consent? Oh, I consented. Okay, well then we don't really have much to work with here. You know, if you didn't consent and they came in, we can argue it's the fruit of the poisonous tree. But if you just let them in, then we don't have much to work with. But you know, like you said, there are situations, it could be a domestic violence situation where somebody has called the police and is reaching out for help, and you guys are coming in to do your job to save somebody from possibly being physically harmed or killed. And so I just, from my standpoint, I find myself a lot of times, and I know Tracey does too. Tracey does neglect and delinquency, family law. I do criminal and all of that as well. And I find myself educating the public about the whole process after they've already given a statement to the police. They've already given all their rights away. And because you guys have a playbook from the prosecutor. The prosecutor says they want certain things. They want a statement. They want a confession. They got other evidence. They want a slam dunk to meet each element of the offense. Right. And, you know, and a lot of times I meet with clients and they're like, oh, Mr. McCoy, that's not what I said. That's not what happened. And I didn't say that. And I'm like, okay, was your statement given freely, voluntarily? Because you got a form here saying it was, you know. And so those of us that are defense attorneys get really frustrated because it's like people, you know, we're not saying don't. I mean, my first thing I'll say is this: don't get in trouble, okay? Don't hang around people that are gonna get you in trouble in the first place, okay? That's what I got to say, okay? Don't get in trouble, okay? That's why I say I do the what to do and stop by the police, because it's like I really talk to you about don't be hanging around those chickens, hang with the eagles, because I don't want to see you in jail anyway. I want to see you on the street. Oh, Miss McCoy, like some of the students at Martin Luther King High School, I did a program and they said, well, we had some students that heard your presentation and then they had an incident with the police and they used your tips and nothing happened. And that's what I want to hear. I don't want to see.
Speaking of tips, though, what about traffic stops? Because look at the Philando Castile case.
Right.
You know, to me, Philando Castile almost did everything right. I don't think he should have reached to get I think he was reaching for his gun license or his driver's license or something. And what about traffic stop tips? Because those can be very dangerous for both police and for citizens. Sheriff Jerry.
Yeah, so I'll say, so Robyn, I appreciate all your work into what to do when stopped by the police, because it is preventive, right? We're trying to, and I like the way you framed it, we're trying to choreograph this dance between the police and people that get stopped. And the more, you know, think about it. I know when, I know when I went through driver's ed way back when in high school, that they don't do it anymore. But when I went through driver's ed, nobody told me what to do when I got stopped by the police. Right. Nobody told me that. My parents told me a little bit of it, right? But outside of that,
what did your parents say? I'm curious, what did your parents say?
My dad just said, be careful. Don't put your hands on the steering wheel and do what the police tell you to do. You know, remember, you know, my background's from the South. So, you know, so they were like, look, you don't mess with the police, just put your hands on the steering wheel. And, you know, we've got a little more sophisticated, only in the sense of giving a little more direction. But what I would say is this: listen, again, you don't know what the police knows when they pull you over.
Right.
And I give the same advice I've given my sons. Don't make any sudden movements. Follow the direction of the police. Make sure you know where you're. Let me back up and say this to first. Driving is a privilege, it's not a right.
Right.
And when the state gives you that privilege, you've agreed to do certain things.
Right.
You've agreed to produce your government ID that says you can drive, insurance that says you're driving legally, you know, registration. So all of that comes with the privilege to drive. I try to tell people that right up front.
Okay.
Now, your rights are, they can't search your vehicle illegally. You shouldn't be physically abused. You know, all of those things. Those are your rights. Right. So you should protect those things. But when the police ask you for your information, you should provide your information. The other thing I tell folks too is make sure that that information is in one spot. You know exactly where it is, and you don't access it till the police tell you to do that.
Right.
Don't make any movements. Don't do any of that stuff. If the police officer is rude, if you believe that you're being mistreated, that you were stopped for any reason other than a driving violation or some other issue, that traffic stop is not the time to argue that case.
Right.
You argue that if you have to go to court or if you're going to file a complaint or that time. That's the time you argue that. Because as tense as you are, as frightened as you may be because the police has stopped you, the police are tense because it's an unknown. They don't know who you are. They don't know what's in that car, any of those things. So you have tension and stress every time that there's a traffic stop. You're trying to minimize that by not getting into some back and forth with the police. Ask for his or her ID, right? We always say badge number, but now it's like ID, give me your card, give me your name, something along those. Make a mental note of where you were, where the stop was, the day, the time. So when you file your report, you have all that information.
Right.
But I mean, I can't stress it enough that I don't care. You know, people want to videotape and all that kind of stuff. I'll just say that if the passenger's videotaping with their phone, fine. Don't you try to videotape with your phone or tape with your phone in the middle of a traffic stop. Because now
Don't do that. That's a no.
No, because here's why I say that. It's because while you're, first off, you got to go get your phone.
Right.
So
they don't know it's a phone.
Yeah.
They don't know it's a phone. They don't know what's in your hand. They don't
Right.
know any of that stuff. That is not the time to do that. And I would say some police departments have body cam, so that video will have access to it. But I'm really, more than anything, don't make any gestures that may cause a police officer to respond with an escalated level of force.
No furtive gestures. And do your officers, your deputies, corporals, the ones that are on patrol, do they wear body worn cameras out there?
Yes. So we have body cams, we have in-car video. We are very, very clear on our expectation that those cameras are to be on and to be fully recording both audio and visual. We do random checks to make sure we don't have to have an incident. Our command officers are directed just to randomly pull video and just watch video for two reasons. Not just finding them doing something wrong, but finding them doing stuff right. And when we find them doing stuff right, that becomes training aids. That's the stuff you show new recruits. Here's how you're supposed to do it. And the other thing they're told too is
before you go on, do you think that command should have the controls on body worn cameras and dash cams, that the controls should be at the command center and not rest with the individual officer?
Well, two things. So for most places, you have so many staff you can't control it, right? So it's you'd have to have somebody sitting at the control center monitoring all the traffic to turn them on and off. I will say this: the technology has come out now, where we're testing it now. We're going to purchase it, where command officers now can live in real time see what the deputy's seeing. So now we can access their body cam in real time.
In real time.
Is that part of smart police uniforms? The smart police uniforms?
Yeah, well, so we use Axon. So it's part of it's part of the Axon package, which is, my opinion, is probably the best audio visual package that you can get. I'll just give you another example that we have. Every time our staff draws their gun or their taser, their body cam automatically comes on.
Oh, okay. There you go. Okay, I like that.
Yeah. And matter of fact, if anyone within, I'm going to say 30 feet, so say you have multiple staff respond, if any of the other staff within 30 feet draw their weapon or their taser, then everybody's body cams automatically come on. They should already be on, but it's a fail safe that in the event they forget to do it, they'll automatically come on. So that kind of technology, I think is good because you're going to have human error. So just because our policy says you have to turn it on, you know, in a stressful situation, they may forget to turn it on.
Right.
Right.
But
Well, that's why I said the command center, control center could have, you know, control. I mean, that's coming in the future, but I'd like you to comment, Sheriff Jerry, about policing and technology. That is like my big thing. And so we know that the automatic license plate readers are coming in, ALPRs, drones, facial recognition technology is already being used by many departments and offices. DPD uses it. The
What about gun
ShotSpotter,
scanners too?
gunshot
Like,
detection,
yeah,
right?
I wanted to ask about gun scanners because we just had a meeting with the criminal defense bar in Wayne County, and they were talking about gun scanners being used. Like, do you know anything about that as well? I want to add that to what Tracey's asking.
So I think you may be talking about it. They call it ShotSpotter.
ShotSpotter, right?
Yeah. So I think so. So let's just take all the technology, and then we can break out some if you want. So
Okay.
I think there's value in technology. So just like in any other profession, right? Not just the police, but you know, it's more important for the police because of the role that we play, right? I tell staff, and I teach classes, I tell the police officers all the time, I said, listen, and then I'll get right to the technology piece. I said, look, if my plumber is biased against me for whatever reason, bald head, black guy, whatever, and he doesn't sweat my pipes right,
Okay.
the worst thing that can happen is my leak stays, I get a new plumber.
Okay.
If my police officer is biased against me for whatever reason, I could lose my life.
Right.
Or I could lose what's most important to me, right? My freedom. So that's why, you know, we talk about technology. Technology is important in so many different spaces, but it's so important in the police space because of what we can do. So, you know, I think there's value in ShotSpotter. And Detroit's starting to see some of that value already. But it's not as much the technology, it's how you use the technology, right?
Right.
And also for us to know, it's the same thing with data. So we're talking about intelligence. Well, let me park that and get back to technology. We know that there's some issues with facial recognition, right? We know that.
Right.
So we should be aware of that. And we should continue to strive to see how do we maybe leverage this kind of technology in a way that's fair and equitable. So right now, people don't have confidence in facial recognition because there's been so many studies that show, especially with Black and brown folk, that the facial recognition is inaccurate.
Right.
And so when somebody says to me, yeah, but it's only inaccurate 10% of the time. So what we're saying is, well, we're or whatever that percentage is. I'm just saying, whether it's 10%, 3%.
I'm sorry for making a face.
Oh yeah.
Wow.
Well, do you want to be the 3 or 4% where it's wrong?
Right.
So are we saying we're willing to accept collateral damage? That it's okay if that percentage is inappropriately treated, just so we can have the technology. So as we're thinking about that technology, we have to do it in the most thoughtful, deliberate, strategic way. And I have a challenge rolling out technology that I know is faulty a percent of the time, because I don't know when that percent is going to rear its head and it's going to be unfair to someone. We're thinking about now moving into a drone program.
Oh, okay.
So I've told my staff to do the staff work for us to start the drone program. Now I can have drones and use them on known situations, right? Like the barricaded gunman.
Okay.
Use drones in that situation. What I'm not a proponent of, and what we won't have in Washtenaw County, not in the sheriff's office, is to just be flying drones with facial recognition technology to try to identify folks. I don't think that's the appropriate use. I think we can use technology in a targeted, strategic, deliberate way, and the people need to be confident that it's not going to result in disparate treatment. And
but what about the policy? Is there policy that is being implemented with the rollout of the drone program? I as a lawyer, believe that, that must follow
without
civil liberties.
Without a shadow of a doubt. So here's what you'll get here in Washtenaw County. Before we roll out any drone program, We will have community engagement sessions.
Oh, good.
And we have what we call the 21st Century Policing Compliance Commission.
Right.
Okay.
So that commission, when we're drafting that policy, we're going to send it to that policy committee, which is made up of not just our staff, but community members.
Right.
We're also going to send it to the ACLUs. The same thing we did with our immigration policy. We sent it to the ACLU before we made it a policy. Because here's what I know. When we roll it out, the ACLU and others are going to weigh in anyway. So let me just give it to you up front. Let me give you the policy up front. Tell me what you like about it. Tell me what you don't like about it. And let's work to roll out a policy that can be supported by the people.
Preemptive and proactive. That's great.
Right. And with what you're saying about technology too, I would say it can make a world of difference as a criminal defense attorney, because sometimes you have it. Sometimes I have clients that we read the report and they're like, they lied on me, they lied. And then they show me I get the video, we show the video. And sometimes the client looks at the video and is like, okay, Mr. McCoy, okay, no. And or sometimes I've seen videos where the police are breaking the rules.
But the issue is, was a video legally obtained? You know, there was that whole, what it is in the Fourth Amendment about, I believe, you know, being able to detect things with the human eye. Well, drones are not the human eye. Surveillance cameras are not the human eye. I mean,
well, I'm talking about more body cam videos. That's where the
ACLU was coming from.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. I think so. You know, it's like anything else, right? Technologies continue to evolve. We should be getting smarter about it. I think we should continue to study it and evaluate it, and all the technology. So what we haven't done in the past is filter it through this equity lens, right? We've always thought about it from a strategic standpoint, the effectiveness of the technology from an enforcement standpoint. That's important, but the other side of that coin is also the equity of the practice. Are we employing practices that we know have a disparate impact on any group? It's been mostly Black and brown folks, but it should be any group. And then as a community, we should ask this question and be prepared to answer this question. Is the effectiveness of the whatever we're doing, does it outweigh the potential disparate impact on any group? And that should be a community conversation. It should not just be left to the police to make that decision. It should be the people and the police having a conversation about, here's how we make our community better. Here's the potential downfall of that. Now let's build in as everything that we can to mitigate the risk of unfair treatment of folks. Because that I think is the part of the police legitimacy piece. If you don't trust that we're using the equipment right, fairly, and it's not unfairly targeting folks, if you don't trust that, then you can't support what we do, and we can't co-produce public safety if one member of the partnership doesn't trust the other member.
Right. And I know, Jerry, we definitely want to get, I know you may have limited time, but we want to talk about the two incidents I referenced. First, the incident, I don't know, did you see any of the footage of the brother that in the military, and they stopped him? And, you know, he did, just like in your card, you know, we talk about pulling over in a well-lit area. So because he don't know, you know, it looks like it's the police, but sometimes it may not be. So he pulled over in a well-lit area, and we saw him engage. They were engaging, looked like they were trying to get him out the car, and then they sprayed him with pepper spray. And I mean, what are your thoughts on that scenario? So
it's interesting. Obviously, we don't have all the story. All we have is the video. But so you heard the officers giving, you know, repeated directions for him to get out of the car. So for those that didn't see, guy, he's in military garb, but I'll just say this: anybody can wear military garb. That's the first thing, because people wear it all the time. And he really is leaning with his arms out, and he's telling the police he's scared.
Right.
He is, and I got to tell you,
he had his arms out of the car.
So he's leaning with his arms out of the car. They're telling him, and he's still seatbelted in. So the police are telling them, take your seatbelt off and get out of the car.
Right.
And they're yelling this repeatedly. Take your seatbelt off and get out of the car. So he eventually opens the door to the car, to the car, but he doesn't get out. He's still seatbelted in.
Right.
So I don't know what was in his mind. If he's afraid if I reach to take my seatbelt off, they'll think I'm reaching for something.
Right.
So it really is this precarious situation. The police are yelling. He appears to be afraid. He's saying he's afraid. And ultimately what happens is they spray him, and that's as far as I got, and they end up getting him out of the car. So it really is this tense situation. And I gotta be honest, this is several years ago, we were at this forum. It's like 600 people at this forum at EMU, and it's a town hall. And in town halls, I never really try to explain a whole lot, because oftentimes that's not where you're going to really educate, especially people who are sort of hyped up. So one lady asked me this question. She says, well, Sheriff, can you guarantee me, because we're talking about this is what to do if you get stopped by the police, is one of the things we're talking about. And she says, well, Sheriff, can you guarantee me that if my son does everything that you're telling him to do, that he'll be okay? And in all honesty, I had to say to her, no, I can't. And that is, you know what? That's the drop the mic comment in my mind around all this.
Right.
We can't guarantee it. So if
there's always that X factor, that wild card dynamic that comes into play. No one has any control over that whatsoever. Right, Sheriff?
You're exactly right. What I followed it up with is, I can tell you, if you do the things that we're telling you to do, the likelihood of that situation ending in a peaceable way, de-escalated, is much higher than if you ignore the directions from the police and get into a back and forth, arguing back and forth with the police. So there are no guarantees in any traffic stop, but we can increase the likelihood of us all going home if we both do the right thing.
Right. I think that's the goal, is for everybody to get home and tell their tale. And what Detective Brian Fountain with the Detroit Police Department, what he coins the phrase, because he does the programming on what to do with Stop by the Police. We partner up to comply now, complain later. Like, and you said too earlier, when you have an incident, we tell people, write it down right after the incident. Call the ACLU, call some of us attorneys, run it by us. I get calls all the time. Well, this is what happened. I can let you know, were the police in the right or were they in the wrong? I want to hear the story. I don't want to see on the news. I don't want one of my clients, I gave him the cards, Jerry, that you have and the ACLU, and he gonna show me a video of him arguing with the police. And I'm like, that's not what I was advising you to do. I don't want to see you arguing with the police. Obviously from defense attorney side, we don't want you to be giving statements. We want you to give your name, your real name, not a fraudulent name, so you can catch a case. But we don't want you to be giving a major statement so to help the police to make a case against you. I know people freeze up, and sometimes the police can trick them into saying things. And so, but we want, the ultimate goal is that you live to tell your tale. And if the police officer was racist, sexist, classist, whatever, we let command deal with that, or outside agencies, but you just get tired. And I know, and I do know that we want to take some time and talk about George Floyd. But Tracey, did you have anything to add before we started talking about that?
Well, Robyn, I was just wondering, were there any questions that came off of the Political Coffee Facebook page? I was just curious about that. And I wanted to ask Sheriff Jerry about special issues regarding CPL holders, concealed pistol license holders, because of that Philando Castile situation. He was reaching for either his license, his gun license, or his driver's license, and he was shot by the police officer and killed. So I know CPL holders have a special duty to announce, but do you have any special tips for CPL holders when dealing with police on traffic stops?
No, Tracey, I think you hit the most important piece, right? So when the officer approaches, you have that obligation to announce that you're a CPL holder and that you have a firearm with you, and to tell the police officer where the firearm is. So is it on your person? It's on my hip, it's on my ankle, or they say I'm a CPL holder, but the weapon is in my glove compartment, wherever it is. Tell that officer right away, and don't reach for it. Don't try to, you know what, when you are providing your license, registration, proof of insurance, if it's a traffic stop situation, at that time you say, my CPL is right, in with that other information. I'm going to hand you all of that at the same time, but don't take it upon yourself, again, like anything else, to try to access any of that information. Just let the police officer direct you to do that. But yes, right up front, let them know, I'm a CPL holder and I am armed, and my firearm is wherever it is on your person or wherever it is in your vehicle.
It can save your life.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. And I know I will be interviewing Sergeant Rush, talking more specifically about the gun issue. I mean, in Wayne County, there's been this, I don't know if you've heard Sheriff Clayton in the news about that their CPL office in Wayne County has been closed or is very slow even before the pandemic. So you've got some people who have had valid CPLs, they expire, or I've had, we know, I've known talking to law enforcement that there's been obviously a spike of people getting guns. And I've had people that lawfully get a gun, but they don't get the permit to carry because they're confused about the law and they catch a case. And so so we'll be talking with Sergeant Rush about that, because that, that's just unfortunate, that I don't want people to get in trouble because of ignorance of the law,
Exactly. I'll just say this. Look, this is my belief. If you're responsible, if you think you're responsible enough to carry a sidearm, then you should be responsible enough to take care of all the paperwork that legally allows you to carry the sidearm.
I agree. Sure.
It's
1,000%.
I've had, for 33 years, I've carried one, and I've always tried to respect the responsibility associated with carrying a firearm.
Right. And the key word is responsible, because if you're a hothead, then you don't need to have a weapon. You're gonna have to find another way. So for those folks out there, because I have a client, one of my first murder cases, he's in prison and he got 25 plus 2, 27 years. He was 21. He won't get out till he's like 48. So it's, that's a key, responsible, that you're not a hothead, that you're not gonna just bust out. I mean, I've had other clients that just hotheads, pulling the gun, flashing the gun, catching the case, going to prison, or me having to mitigate, but Sheriff Clayton, I do want us to talk about George Floyd, the Derek Chauvin trial. I know you're working just like the rest of us. I have been able to watch some of it as time permits. Number one, have you been watching the trial? And what are your thoughts about what happened as you understand it?
Yeah, so I appreciate. So yeah, I've been watching a little bit of it. Right, I can catch pieces of it, especially in the evening, because they're playing it back. Let's just go back to the incident in and of itself. I'll just be honest. Listen, the trial is going to come down the way it is, but from everything I think I saw and everybody else saw, that was a murder.
Right.
That seemed, your attorneys, better than I do. It's about intent, right? And what other intent is it when you have your knee on someone's neck and knowingly, or you should have known, that you're restricting the person's airflow, the person's telling you that you're restricting their airflow, and then when you've restricted it so much they can't tell you that anymore, and any resistive behavior. So let's park that there, and then let's just go to the basic training around subject control, use of force. You're allowed to use force to address the resistive behavior that you're getting. So you have a man laying down on his stomach, handcuffed behind his back. Verbally, he's not resisting. It does not appear on camera that physically he's resisting anymore. Right. So now you have an obligation, and it's woven through any somewhat well-written use of force policy, that immediately upon that person ceasing to resist, you have an obligation to stop that level of force. Right? The force is only in response to resistive behavior while you're attempting to control that individual. And everything you see in that video is that they had control. He stopped resisting, if he was resisting at all. So that force should have ceased immediately. And I want to add one more piece to it. So we're introducing in the sheriff's office a new training. It's called ABLE. It's called Active Bystanders for Law Enforcement.
Okay.
And we'll go to, so in most policies, any decent use of force policy, there's a clause in there that talks about a duty to intervene.
Right.
That the police officers have a duty to intervene when they're observing one of their other members doing something that they should not do.
Okay.
But it's not enough anymore just to have the policy say you have a duty. Now you have to teach them what that means. Okay. You have to show them what intervening means. You have to demonstrate it. So this training actually does that. And it's all based on science. It's all based on understanding human beings and our reluctance to intervene. And so we're not only giving them permission to intervene, mandating that they intervene, we're showing them how to intervene. Not just to intervene for someone of equal rank, but you have a duty to intervene in someone that's ranked higher than you. And the George Floyd case is, in my mind, the absolute model for police officers that did not intervene. You had 3 or 4 other officers standing by, watching one of their fellow officers at the time doing something that they knew or should have known that was wrong, and none of them stepped up and intervened. And if they had
Sheriff Clayton, what I find so remarkable is that Derek Chauvin, the defendant, I believe he's got 17 or 19, or had 17 or 19 years on the department. He was their training officer. And so I suppose, I'm just speculating, there might have been an intimidation factor, but there's still a duty to intervene. And there was a younger police officer with, I think, only a few months on the job. I think that could maybe be a mitigating factor for him. But there was one of the police who, this came out in testimony during the Derek Chauvin trial, the Asian police officer, Tao, I believe, there was witness testimony that he did not intervene. He told the bystanders that, see, this is what drugs do, in reference to George Floyd.
Yeah, I think there's so much that's coming out in the trial that you see that just reinforces the things in our profession that people are trying to address and get rid of on a national level. It's another example, and I'll just say this last piece. It's another example of also why you can't just have the policy. So it's not just about policy. You have to train to the policy, but the other overriding factor is, what's the culture of the organization?
Right.
The culture is so important. So I heard the chief testify. I thought he did a remarkable job testifying. And he's talking about, he's talking about the culture of the police. So remember, George Floyd, at the time George Floyd died, Minneapolis had a really good use of force policy.
Okay. Really?
Now there are things
hard to believe. Given the circumstances.
Well, that's the point. Now, I said it was a good policy, not a perfect policy.
Right.
But even in that, even with having a really good policy, the culture seemed to conflict with what's written in the policy. So excuse me, Chauvin had to have believed he can get away with it.
Right.
He had to believe, I can do this, and there's not going to be any kind of
repercussions.
Accountability. And that speaks to the culture in the agency. More importantly, you have 4 or 3 other officers there watching that happen, and then they don't intervene. That speaks to the culture of the police department. So again, the policy is important, the training is important, supervision, but what's the culture in the organization?
Well, Sheriff Clayton, you raised a great point. You asked the question rhetorically, what is the culture of the police organization? So this is my question to you. When it comes to use of force policy, should that really be dictated by the individual law enforcement agencies, or shouldn't the court be deciding and determining what is the the proper use of force. I understand now there's a shift from a standard of due process to reasonableness to now what is necessary and proper. What is necessary and proper, that still seems a bit vague to me. What's your take on it?
It is, right? That's subjective. And you can start to try to anchor some of that in some very specific criteria. But, you know, the challenge is you can't speak to every scenario that a police officer may face. So, you know, the law has been pretty specific in terms of certain aspects of use of force, right? Tennessee versus Gardner. There are a number of different cases
what
that
about
speak.
The Graham case? The Graham case is very instructional. The guy who was having like a diabetic reaction, the cops thought he was drunk. They treated him like, you know what, terrible. And he didn't get killed, but he got injured in the process. He was just simply asking for some orange juice or something so he wouldn't go into a diabetic coma. And the police abused him and resulted in a case. But this Graham case is what really illustrates whether or not police should be deciding what is appropriate use of force when it should be another entity. It really should be the courts. It should be case law, not the individual police departments, because as you said, it's too subjective. It's just too arbitrary in my mind.
Yeah, I think, again, I think the case law has provided a nice architecture for use of force. And we can try to add more to it, but, you know, policing is the number that everybody talks about is 18,000 police agencies. Okay. So there's somewhere around 18,000 police agencies in the country. Most of them are small agencies. So the agencies that get all the attention are the DPDs, Minneapolis, LA, New York, right? Dallas. Yeah. But quite frankly, the majority of police agencies in the country are small, less than 30 member agencies. So, you know, the issue becomes, if a local unit of government wants to have a police agency, then you must make sure you have the resources to make sure that the right policies are in place, the right training's in place, that you have leadership that's that is influencing the agency with the right kind of culture. So all of those things, but it's a local issue. You know, the law allows, or our country allows, local units of government to decide they want their own police agency. And
States' rights.
Right. So if you're going to have your own police agency, then you should be able to adhere to the higher standards. And I don't believe that that's the case.
So you don't believe in national standards? You don't think there should be like a national standard effectuated in terms of use of force?
Yeah, I think there should be a national standard, but I think the best you're going to get is what we have, maybe go a little deeper than what we have now. It's really just going to be a framework. And at the end of the day, it's still incumbent upon. So even if you had a national standard that said you could only do X, Y, and Z, it's still the culture of the agency that's going to influence how those policies are carried out.
Yeah.
So I don't believe that we can legislate our way out of this.
Wow.
We can have some legislation that will provide some guidelines, some legislation that will provide penalties when those guidelines are violated. But quite frankly, this is an issue of leadership. This is an issue of leadership in every police agency. And that is really what is going to dictate how those services are delivered to the people.
Okay, and Sheriff Clayton, I know you just talked about legislation. What are your thoughts about the George Floyd legislation that's pending? You know, it's passed the House, and I think what it's held up in the Senate. Specifically, can you speak to the issue of what your position is on qualified immunity?
So qualified immunity is, you know, it's one of those things that evolved, right? From the original qualified immunity has gotten diluted through some of the current case law. And now they want to eliminate it altogether. And I don't believe in absolutes on anything, to be very honest. With very few things, I don't believe in absolutes. The same way I don't believe in absolutely banning the chokehold because of the scenario I just gave you.
Okay.
that look. So what I'm saying, if you ban
And no
children,
knock warrants.
yeah, I don't believe in an absolute ban on no knock warrants, because I think that there are those small situations, and if you have the right criteria and it's enforced, that we can do no knocks on a very small basis, and it's appropriate. In qualified immunity, I think we need to go back to the original intent of qualified immunity, and that now I think the way it evolved is it went to a reasonable. I think it's a reasonable belief. I have it written down here somewhere. I was doing some studying on it, on how it evolved. But the original intent around qualified immunity had a much higher standard.
Right.
It wasn't just, the police made a mistake and they thought they were doing the right thing, so they should have qualified immunity. That it's this blanket thing that excuses all police action. That I think if you're going to have people that are willing to put their lives on the line for others, that are willing to make split-second decisions that sometimes have impact people's lives and freedom, that there needs to be a standard in place that if the police officer did it with the right information, trying to do the right thing, and you can prove that they should not be held individually accountable for it.
Sheriff Jerry, you spoke earlier about recruiting. You talked about the demographics of your sheriff's office. And so this brings me to the Police Bill of Rights. There are a lot of police out here who say, you know what, I don't even know how to be a police anymore. I don't really even know how to arrest somebody with everything that's going on in America today. In Maryland, the governor, Larry Hogan, he supported the Police Bill of Rights. And as I understand it, it was just repealed by the state legislature there. Do you have any take or opinion on this trend toward Police Bill of Rights, so that police can feel that they're protected and that they can be entitled to due process when they go about their duties as a police officer in America?
Oh, and
Yeah,
I would
so-
just before you respond to that, I would note that I looking up qualified immunity, I see it says New Mexico eliminated qualified immunity on April 7th of this year. So, but Jerry, if you want to go ahead and respond to her question, that'd be great.
Yeah, so I think it's like a lot of things. Oh, here we go. So let me go back. Let's just hit qualified immunity really, really quick. I had to look at my notes. There was a time I could remember all this stuff. I can't remember this stuff like I used to. So in the Supreme Court decision in 67, right, they provided what's called, modest protection for the police, this good faith effort. So the standard was there a good faith effort by the police, right? But good faith didn't mean that the police acted maliciously, that they knowingly or should have known that their behavior or their actions would violate people's constitutional rights or to harm folks. And that got diluted. So it's the Harlow v. Fitzgerald case that expanded that protection, right?
Okay.
It turned from good faith to this, that the victim must point out that the officer knew that their behavior was wrong, and it involved something that they should have known. It involved past case law that should have advised them that it was wrong. It just set this standard for being able to hold police accountable for their behavior.
But it shifted the burden of proof to the victim.
Exactly.
That's wrong in my mind.
Exactly. So now, if you go back to the original case law from 67, then it really is upon the police to prove that I had a good faith effort, that my behavior, my actions weren't malicious. So you should shift that burden back. But you had a question. I just wanted to hit that piece. What did you ask me?
Thanks for clarifying it. You're right. I just wanted to get your take on the Police Bill of Rights. I mean, all across the country, departments, sheriff's offices, the cops, they want a Police Bill of Rights. They feel exposed out there with these demands to abolish the police and defund the police. I don't think anybody really wants that. I think they want better police departments, but to abolish the police. So I'd like you to take on both of those issues, if you wouldn't mind. Your position on a police bill of rights, you being the sheriff of a big department, and the other issue, these calls to abolish the police, defund the police. What's your take on that?
Yeah, so I think that, again, I'll go back to the profession. So we have men and women that have chosen to enter a profession of first responding in sometimes violent, quickly evolving situations, not all of them, but some of them.
Right.
But they are asked to make decisions oftentimes with limited information that requires immediate action, and that there should be an expectation on the country that they do that with a good faith effort.
Right.
That they're trained, that the agencies laid out policy, and that there should be no expectation that the police are never going to make a mistake.
Right.
That the police are never going to act in error. And I think the Police Bill of Rights should be framed around that.
Okay.
A recognition that if you do that you have to do everything in your power to make decisions that are consistent with the law, that uphold people's constitutional rights, but there's a recognition that you're not going to be perfect.
Right.
And in those instances where you're not perfect, that you're going to be afforded due process like everybody else, that you're going to be treated fairly, and that your actions are going to be evaluated based on the information that you knew at the time, not based on information that people get after the fact.
Okay.
And that there should be protections in that. And that in that good faith effort, if you make a mistake, you or your family should not lose their livelihood as a result of it, right? So I believe that those protections should be in place. What I don't believe
some
is,
would say Derek Chauvin made a mistake. Is he beyond making a mistake?
But that to me, Derek Chauvin was more than a mistake.
Yeah.
I mean, that's more than a mistake. I mean, I can see like the Capitol Police. We just saw that Capitol Police officer that got killed, and they're trying to hire more police. And I think overall, I've said this before. Most police are good. We want police. This whole defund the police, that sounds like some very bougie type stuff. You talk to my people in Detroit, when they call the police, they want the police to come. They don't want to defund the police. They don't want to abolish the police. They want the police to come and regulate. So that's just very suburban.
They're
I don't know.
praying for the police to come.
Yeah, we want the police to come.
right.
And the Capitol Police, they need to recruit more. They got, they were talking about today a White Lives Matter protest. You got police. Some police are scared of Black people. It's like, y'all need to be scared. Y'all scared of us. Most of us not gonna do jack to y'all. It's the white folks, some of these white fanatical folks basking in their white privilege. They're more likely to snap and do something. So I know police, you got to be careful no matter what. You got people on drugs, mental health issues. But yeah, go, Sheriff, if you want to go ahead and respond to Tracey's question.
So I'm just worried that the pendulum now has swung too far the other way.
Oh,
so just think about it. I do think that if it swings too far, you'll have a hard time recruiting the right people for the job, right? The right people that have this sense of service and they see the honor in the profession. So I think the Bill of Rights is appropriate, but it's got to be applied appropriately. Okay. That the police have to be, listen, let me frame it and back up and say this, and we need to be held accountable. Look, we work for you. So the protests, when people challenge what we do, I think that's the right thing to do. Our power and authority come from the people. We don't get it from somewhere else. Okay. So I think there's appropriateness when the people say, look, we have given you this authority. We don't think that you are exercising that authority appropriately. So we want to hold you accountable to that. And look, I told you in my past life, we were doing all this work in racial profiling. I remember in these trainings 20 years ago, telling police officers sitting in the room, listen, consent searches, pretext stops, all that stuff, those aren't rights that the police have. Those are privileges that have been granted to us by the courts with the expectation that we're going to be very judicious in terms of how we use that. If we're not, if we don't hold ourselves accountable, then the people are going to hold us accountable. And I think a lot of what we're seeing right now is the people saying, look, we are giving you time after time after time, police, the opportunity to hold yourselves accountable. We don't believe you're doing that, so now we're going to do it for you, right? And I think that's what we're seeing, is that people are trying to hold police accountable because for some, they've lost faith that we're going to do it, that we're going to police ourselves, hold ourselves accountable. And so what I'm saying is the pendulum shouldn't be on either side. There's a way for police to hold themselves accountable with the partnership of the people helping us do that. So to hit your abolish the police question, I have a couple friends of mine that are abolitionists, right? I've been in a number of these meetings, right? The Center for American Progress. I'd never forget, we were in Chicago having a meeting, and one of the pastors, Pastor Mike from Oakland, California, is into the abolitionists. And I said, look, I get what you're trying. And, part of what they say is, look, we believe we want a community, we want a country, we want a society where we don't need you, where we can regulate ourselves and all that. So my response is always this. Okay, I would love to have that society. I would love to have a society where you don't need some outside entity regulating. I don't think we'll ever get there.
Right.
But what I say is until we get there, we are stuck with each other. So let's figure out how we do this together. And to Robyn, your point around the defunding issue, a lot of the communities where we provide services that I talk to the residents, the constituents, they're like, Sheriff, we ain't trying to abolish you.
Right.
Here's what we want. We want to be treated with dignity and respect. We want your deputies to be able to discern the difference between the people that are involved in criminal behavior, inappropriate behavior, from those of us that are law-abiding people that want to live in a nice, stable community.
Right.
That's what we want. We want to partner with you. We don't want to be dictated to. That's what I hear. And that's what I think we should be striving for. And I think some of what we're seeing in terms of legislation, some of what we're seeing in terms of what people are asking for, is some of it, I think, is designed to punish the police. So you've been doing this to us for so long. Now there's got to be retribution. You should be punished for the inappropriate treatment of Black and brown folks for over 200 years. So I think it's some of that.
What can agencies do to remedy this? I mean, do they need to take a knee? I've seen some police taking knees, at protests. I mean, police community relations have got to be repaired to go forward. I learned in law school from a law professor that anytime you have more than, maybe 2 or 3 people, you need regulation. And, it would be great if we could have world peace and humans could regulate themselves, but I personally do not believe in that either. So, what are agencies to do going forward in the future? What's your take?
I think part of it is, so first thing we got to do is we have to acknowledge the wrongs that have been done for over 200 years.
Okay.
So I do this racial equity and 911 course. And part of what I talk about is, look, we can't ignore the history of Black and brown folks and the police, right? And we can talk about all the way back from the 1700s with the slave patrols in the Carolinas, right? And part of what I do in the class is I read the oath that I read to my staff, that police agencies all over the country read to their staff, right? I, the undersigned, do solemnly swear to protect the Constitution of the United States, blah, 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 blah. And then you know what I read for them? I read for them this oath that was done. If you just bear with me real quick, I might have it right at hand. I won't delay it if I can't get it right in hand here.
That's fine. And while you're looking, I didn't, Tracey, I looked on the page. I didn't see any questions. I'm sure there are going to be some questions after we put the, more folks see the videos, but I don't see any questions right now.
Okay. Thanks for checking. I was just curious.
Yeah.
So the other one is, there's this oath that I'll read for them that sounds very close to the oath that we read today. And you know what it's from? It's from 1828, the slave patroller's oath.
Wow.
And so we talk about that, right? And then we talk about Reconstruction and how, you know, when slave patrols went away and they moved more toward the police, it was the police that controlled free Black folks. And
Right.
Jim Crow being around restricting of movement and economic improvement for Blacks and separation, and how police were used to enforce that. And more importantly, as we move through the civil rights, how police were used to enforce when white folks thought Blacks were operating outside of their place in social norms. And then that fast forwards right to today, right? With the Karens calling into 911 when they see Black folks doing things that they don't think Black folks should be able to do because it's outside of their societal norms. Right. So we have to acknowledge the fact that police, even when they were well-intentioned, have been used as a tool by not just government, but by white people in exercising their white privilege against Black folks. That's just our reality. So I think, you know, if we're ever going to move in the direction that we're talking about, and part of that healing is to acknowledge the harm that's been done.
Okay.
And acknowledging our role in doing that harm from a professional standpoint, right?
Sounds good.
So
Sounds good.
So you get there, and then we start talking about how do we now work together. But
Okay.
you know this, it's hard for me to want to work with you if you are refusing to acknowledge the harm that you did to me from the past.
Well,
Right.
that's why acknowledgement is so important. But I think that with training and, you know, stopping this implicit and explicit bias by police, law enforcement agencies showing that they are trying to do better and actually doing better. You know, I saw this apprehension technique. I thought it was unbelievable and just beautiful. In your old neighborhood, I think across the way in New Jersey, there were calls to actually abolish the police, and they did abolish the police department in this a suburb of New Jersey. I can't recall the exact name of the city.
I've heard about that. I read an article about that.
And then they showed this video of police after they abolished the police department, but they still had something operating, and they had to apprehend this individual. And it was like a little parade. You know, nobody took out their pepper spray or their taser, their, you know, firearm. They all just kind of converged around him, gave him personal space, and they just walked him down the street until he ran into like this barricade, and he was peaceably apprehended and taken into custody. And the citizen was not hurt. The suspect was not hurt. The police were not hurt. Bystanders were not hurt. I don't know what the name of that apprehension technique is, Sheriff Clayton, but it's one of these new techniques that police agencies are trying to adopt to do better and to increase the faith from the community that police agencies don't want to hurt citizens, that they're just trying to do their jobs and keep the public safe.
Right. Yeah. And Jerry, too, what comes to mind is some of the things that you were talking about, and is truth and reconciliation. I mean, there's so many layers. There's truth and reconciliation. It needs to happen with Blacks and whites in America over slavery, but there's a very much a need for, I know I saw the mayor of St. Louis, who is a sister, she was talking about on the news yesterday, there needs to be truth and reconciliation with the police and the Black community. I mean, I was in South Africa when I was doing an externship in law school, and I was there to witness, and I had studied about truth and reconciliation, but we very much need that in America because, you know, and I know I'm not the only one. When I watch the George Floyd, you know, the Derek Chauvin trial, when I see George Floyd being murdered and they keep looping the video over and over again, I'm traumatized. And I mean, it goes back to the history, like slavery and all that. And he's begging for his life, like, please, master, don't kill me. And master still kills him. And master, not only does he kill him, he kills him with a look on his face, like no remorse, just a very sickening look. And I know that goes back to the kids. When we talk to these kids and they're like, okay, it's
You're
great to
talking
talk.
about Derek Chauvin?
Yeah, they're like,
He looked like a member of the KKK, Ku Klux
yeah,
Klan. I
the
mean,
kids, the kids always
just a
come back
sick
to me. They
look
always
on
come.
his face with his hand
Yeah.
in his pocket, while he's
Yeah,
killing
the
somebody.
kids are always
or
coming
doing-
back to me. They're like, it's great that you're giving us these tips, but what are you doing to eliminate the cops that are brutalizing us? And so I know we've had you for a couple of hours, Jerry, and I'm sure you've got to go, but I want to give you this last question: is what steps are being taken to eliminate these racist KKK, some of these cops, like either with your group or office or on a broader context?
Yeah, a couple of things really quick. So, Tracey, the place I think you're talking about. So you're talking about Camden, New Jersey.
Yes,
Right.
right. It was Camden, right?
Yeah. So I know the former chief there. He and I were part of the steering committee for NYU Law School. It's called the Policing Project.
Okay.
So I forget Scott's last name, but he's retired from Camden. So the thing with Camden, so the story is they abolished the police and they built something else. Essentially what they did is they changed from a police department to essentially a public safety agency.
Yes.
So they never really abolished it. They just sort of changed it. But I'll go back to what I said before about leadership. So Scott is probably one of the best criminal justice leaders I've ever met, because he understood that it really was the power of the culture, changing the culture of the agency. And one of the things that he did was he took on the unions, and he had the backing of the mayor and all those folks to basically blow it. And the way he was able, so here's what they did is when they blew up Camden PD as it was known, they got to blow up the collective bargaining agreement.
Oh, okay. So that's how they got out of it.
And then
Fraternal Order of Police, that's a toughie.
And then they rebuilt it in a new image. And all the things that were restricting previous chiefs on accountability with the Camden PD, when they rebuilt it, all those restrictions were gone. So then the chief was free to put some accountability measures in place and some other things to help build it in a different image. And again, Scott knew the power of co-producing that with the people. So that was that one piece. I think how we move forward, I'll say, as I said before, it really is around how we build the culture in organizations. I think it really is around leadership. I want to be really, really clear to say that we used to do this Enhancing Policing Community Trust workshop, and I won't bore you with how all the construct of the workshop, but we always would come away when we brought community and police together after they spent the morning apart, is that we want the same thing. We want safe communities. We want to treat each other with dignity and respect. How do we get there? All of those things I think are really, really important. How do we wipe out? And I'll say this, I believe, and I do believe this, and if I didn't believe it, I wouldn't be in the profession for 33 years. I believe that the vast majority of police officers are good people,
right,
trying to do the right thing, sometimes in some of the most precarious positions. And these are folks that will give their life for people that don't look like them. They'll give their life for people that they don't know. That being said, police profession is no different than any other profession. I believe that there are that 10%. Some may argue it's more than that. I don't believe in the few rotten apples piece. There's enough rotten apples that influence how people see the profession. But think about this. There are thousands and thousands and tens of thousands of contacts every day between police and members of the community that are respectful, that people get treated with dignity, that nobody gets harmed or hurt. And we have to make sure that we study those thousands and thousands of interactions,
right,
so we can more replicate those than the ones that result in people getting harmed and hurt and treated with disrespect and have their dignity challenged. And trust me,
right.
I said there maybe 10%, but don't think I'm excusing that 10%. I'm
Okay.
saying that there are hundreds of thousands of contacts that are really, really good and a lot fewer that are bad. I'm not excusing the bad.
Right.
Because I don't think there should be any of them. Because I'm telling you, I don't want that small percentage to be my sons or your cousins or your brothers or your sisters. None of them are acceptable. So we still got to strive to make that those contacts better. But there is a playbook. There are enough of these contacts that end right. We got to replicate those. And how do we get there? Every time there's one that's wrong, people have to be held accountable for it.
But Sheriff Clayton, you talked about enhancing trust between police and the community. One issue that, and this is a big one, that the community has with police is this escalation of the militarization of police agencies. I know you were on SWAT, in Detroit, we call it SRT, but when citizens see police come out and respond, okay, maybe a barricaded gunman or gunwoman incident is different, but when they respond and they got, the tactical gear, and I mean tanks rolling down the street, that puts people off. I just wanted to get your take on this militarization of police and modern day America. I mean, is it really necessary?
So again, I think, like I said before, there are those rare instances. I'll go back to, and you said it, the barricaded gunman, right? There are certain situations where you need that equipment. Look, the guy, what I didn't say to you is the guy that was barricaded was shooting at us with an AR-15. He shot up some of our equipment. He shot at some of our folks, but guess what? Now one of our folks shot back. And that ended with that person in custody without being harmed.
Right.
Here's what I think about with the militarization. So the equipment is what you see. But think about this. In Washtenaw County, we have an armored personnel vehicle. Our SWAT folks are equipped with some of the latest and greatest equipment. But you know what? There were people in Washtenaw County had no idea we had an APV. Not because we were hiding it, it's because we're so judicious in how it is used.
Oh, good.
So it is really, sometimes it's not what you have and what you do, it's how you do it. So and what's the principles that guide what you do? So if I could have all the military equipment in the world, but our philosophy is around the sanctity of life, dignity and respect, de-escalation, creating time and space, making sure people don't get harmed, right? Or I could have none of that equipment, but I can have the philosophy, look, if somebody acts up, you take their behinds out. That there's no tolerance for contempt of cop. We will beat you down, that kind of stuff. So I could not have the equipment, but have the wrong mindset, or I could have the equipment and have the right mindset. I want a combination of both. I don't believe we need to have the stuff that the military has because we're not the military. We don't have the mission of the military. Right. And I'll end with this last one. Let me end with this. A lot of this, so I'll give you the example of the war on drugs. The war on drugs has always been the wrong thing.
Right.
Because if I say I'm in a war, then I also said there's acceptable collateral damage. Because in war, there's acceptable collateral damage. Right. And we know this, right? In the war on drugs, the acceptable collateral damage was Black and brown folks.
Right.
Dying and ended up in jail. And that was the wrong approach. So we don't have wars. We should never have wars with the police. We should.
Police are not soldiers. Police are not soldiers.
That's exactly right. And we shouldn't train them as soldiers. We shouldn't talk about, so we should be very careful in the language we use and how we talk about who we are. And we don't have enemy combatants on American streets. We don't have wars in our neighborhoods. All that stuff is important. The time I say the sheriff's office is engaged in a war on drugs in one of our communities, I have now communicated to my staff that you can use means that almost by any means necessary, we're going to win the war. Mm-hmm. Which means, okay, if somebody dies, they die. If we catch people up in the net, we put them in jail that don't belong in jail, yeah, that's the acceptable damage for us winning the war. And I think for too long, not all, but enough of us in the profession approached it that way. And now we're seeing, you know, jails that are bursting at the seams, prisons that are bursting at the seams, right? We've talked about the number of Black and brown folks killed at the hands of the police. That is the outcome of a war mentality. And obviously we should move away 100%, a 180 away from a war mentality.
Right.
Wow.
Well, Chair Clayton, I want to thank you. You've been with us for a couple of hours, so we definitely appreciate it. And on a Sunday, a beautiful Sunday, hopefully you'll get a chance to get out there and enjoy it. So I know Tracey and I will want you to come back, and I'm sure I'll have calls to start doing some of the programming, probably more virtual. So I'll definitely be reaching out to you. I know Kathy called me about the expungement, because today is the day that the new expungement laws roll out, so we can help more people get their, you know, it's 3 felonies, unlimited misdemeanors, but it depends on the felonies and the misdemeanors, but more people can get their records cleared, redeem themselves, become productive citizens. So again, we want to thank you. God bless you for all that you do. And
yes, thank you, Sheriff Clayton. I got to jump in and thank you too. I join Attorney McCoy in saying that. And yes, we'd love to have you come back, because we want to find out more about your think tank, the Council on Criminal Justice. And I did have a few questions. You're in Washtenaw County. I wonder what your take is on the new prosecutor, Atty Chauvin, and some of, you know, his policies that he's rolling out, like abolishing these pretext stops. So there's more to be discussed in the continuing dialogue on policing in America. And yes, we hope if you have time that you can come back and join Political Coffee. We really appreciate you and everything that you and your office do to protect the citizens of Washtenaw County.
Yeah, thank you so very much for having me. This was a lot of fun. I really appreciate providing a forum to have this kind of discussion. Here's how we start to move the needle, right? Having these type of discussions. We don't have to agree on everything, but we get better when we can talk these things through, because I do know we agree on one thing. We all want to be safer. We want especially all people to be safer, but especially our Black and brown brothers and sisters should be afforded the same kind of protections and treatment as anyone else. So thank you so very much for doing what you do, for having this forum, and for inviting me to join you. So thank you.
Yes. Okay.
Thank
so
you,
folks, this has been Political Coffee. You can see I got my U of M mug, and Sheriff's got his mug. Tracey's got hers. So I hope that you all stay safe, and thank you for joining us for this special edition of Political Coffee. So everybody be safe and blessed. And thanks again, Sheriff Clayton.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Sharon.
Y'all take care. Be safe. Be healthy.
Stay safe. You too. Thank you so much.
Okay,
Bye-bye. Bye, Robyn. Bye, Sheriff Clayton.
Bye.